All right. Well, my name is Claire Griffing. I'm with the City of Albany, and we're really excited to have you all here this evening. It looks like a really great turnout. Thank you for coming on a Tuesday night. We've decided to put on this recycling workshop primarily because we found out that the community really cares about these things. There's been some changes in recycling over the past few years that have been a little bit upsetting. And so we wanted to share with you the reasons why we've had some shifts in our recycling program, and also talk to you about some tips for how to live a zero-waste lifestyle. This ties in really well with our new climate action plan that was adopted in December by City Council, and this is one of several in a workshop series to look to you as residents of Albany to help us combat climate change. So thank you for being here and being climate warriors with us. I'd like to introduce Jess Halter from Cascadia Consulting. You can introduce yourself a little bit more than that, and Jess is here this evening to give a presentation, and then you can talk a little bit about what they can expect after the presentation too. Thank you all for coming.
It's great to see such a big turnout here. I know everyone has a lot of questions. So as Claire mentioned, my name is Jess Halter, and I'm with Cascadia Consulting Group. And I go out to businesses, I go out to multifamily apartment buildings, I go out to work with the community in general throughout the Bay Area. So I have done a lot of these presentations, and no question is too hard. So keep them safe. And we have comment cards. So if you have a question that comes up during the middle of the presentation, write it down on that paper. I know sometimes questions get stuck in your brain and that's all you can think about. So that is why we have the comment cards. You can write it on the back, and then we'll answer those during the Q&A at the very end. So write those down if needed. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk about sustainable materials management and then how the recycling is processed here in Albany, and hopefully alleviate a lot of anxiety people have around recycling and reduce wish cycling. So help you guys recycle right. So we're going to go over quick introductions of who helped put on this presentation, and then we're going to talk a little bit the background on zero waste and go over the circular economy. Then what everyone is here for, Recycling 101, answer, of course, everyone's questions about plastics. And then we'll talk about Composting 101, and then talk about some of the Albany City programs that are here, and then we'll finish off with some tips and tricks for waste reduction. So how can you go even further than recycling and composting? Claire and Lizzie and Bianca, do you want to come introduce yourselves, or do you want me to just talk for you? And also, Lena, would you like to talk from Waste Management? Introduce yourself. So I'll talk while they're coming up here. So with Cascadia, not only do we do zero waste here locally, but we help businesses and cities throughout the country. And we also do the climate action planning, and we actually helped write the Albany Climate Action Plan. So we're very knowledgeable about the local experience. And I also am an Albany resident. I live just up Solano next to the Safeway. So I am very familiar with these rules. I do them every day. So I'm excited to be here and sharing with my neighbors and my community members.
As I mentioned, I'm Claire Griffing. I'm the Sustainability and Resilience Manager for the city, so I help with recycling programs and climate action, among other things.
I'm Bianca. I'm a climate fellow with the City of Albany. I've been working on a variety of projects, some of which I'll be touching on in the presentation today.
Hi, I'm Lizzie Carrade. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator with the City of Albany. So I do climate action planning. I'm the staff liaison for the Climate Action Committee, and then I'm also, I manage the waste and recycling program. So often if you've had trouble with your pickups or anything like that, you call me. So nice to meet you all.
Hi, I'm Lena with Waste Management, so don't call me. No, just kidding. I'm the hauler for, I work for the hauler for Waste Management in Oakland, but the two cities that I'm in charge of is Albany and Emeryville. So I do outreach for multifamily, commercial, and single-family residents. So thank you.
All right, perfect. You guys ready? You have your pens and paper ready? I know, I see a lot of eager people here in the front row, which is shocking. Normally everyone hides in the back, but I'm glad to see you guys here. All right, so as I mentioned, let's start a little bit with the background and give people who maybe don't know very much about zero waste some understanding of why we're here. So the standard way to think about the economy is the linear economy. So we take trees, we take petroleum to make plastics, we take sand to make glass, and we create these products, we design them, we distribute them, people use them just like yourselves, and then we throw them away. And when we throw away trash and you put things in your trash cart here in Albany, this is a valuable resource that is being buried indefinitely at the Altamont landfill in Livermore, California. And so not only do valuable resources that could be recycled if you put them in your trash cart, they can never be recycled, but also if it's food waste or yard waste, that creates methane, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. And we'll go into that a little bit more in the compost section of the training. But in general, when you put items in your trash cart, they are not sorted. They go to the Davis Street transfer station and then are driven directly to Livermore. So we really want to make sure here in Albany that every resident is putting everything that can be recycled into your cart, but no more. And even better, we want to think about how we can design whole systems differently. And there's many different companies out there who are treating the economy in a circular manner. So when they're producing and designing products, they think about their life cycle in the end and are creating them so that once it gets to time to, instead of disposing of products, you can recycle them and go back into the economy. And an important part about the circular economy is what's in the bottom under consumption. So thinking about not only how we use products, but if there's ways to reduce and reuse and repair products that we can use them more often before they enter into the either waste or become recycled. Right. So with the 4 R's, this is a very common topic to talk about with zero waste. And so the first R is reduce. We want to reduce as much as we can by consuming less and thinking about ways we can live a modest lifestyle and also change our habits. There's a lot of really cool tables from local community partners here afterwards that can give you some great ideas on how to reduce the items that we don't need. And there's also ways to rethink how things are being done and to refuse items in the first place so that you're reducing what we need. For the things we can't reduce, that's when we want to think about how we can do items that we're reusing many, many times versus single-use options. If we can't reuse something, that's when we want to think about, okay, is it possible to recycle it, or rot, which is about composting that food waste and yard waste. And so ultimately, these are all great options on how we can have a positive environmental impact with our products. All right. Time to get down to business. Excited to tell you about the recycling industry and give you kind of a crash course in what is and isn't recycled and why here in Albany. Many of you probably know are all very savvy environmentalists. There's many, many reasons we want to recycle. And the first is it limits the reliance on raw natural resources. So instead of cutting down trees, cutting down bamboo, mining for metals, using petroleum and oil for plastics, if we are instead recycling and using recycled products, that helps reduce the reliance on natural resources. In most cases, recycling also limits the amount of manufacturing, the energy it takes to create new products, so there's also a lower environmental impact of doing that. And like we were talking about earlier in that circular economy photo, it turns our waste and it puts it back into the economy in lots of cool ways and turns it into new products versus being buried indefinitely in the landfill. And there's also a lot of pollution that goes around with landfills. Chemicals that go into the landfill, they can leach into the water, they can leach into the soil and the air as well with the methane gas. So recycling also reduces the amount of pollution that's happening for communities that live near landfills. So recycling also, it goes locally to a location in San Leandro. And I don't know if you guys have ever visited it, but it's pretty cool to see how the recycling is processed. So it's dumped onto this conveyor belt, it goes across the conveyor belt, And first, there's people there, standing there, manually removing contaminants. So if you guys are putting something in the recycling cart that shouldn't be there, it's someone's job to remove it. So that's why you want to make sure that everything that's going into the recycling cart is actually recyclable. Then there is a lot of different mechanical things that help separate materials by type. And then there's, again, employees who are removing contaminants that might have slipped through the mechanical sorting process that happens at the facility. Next, I think these bales are all really cool. They take all these products and all baled with like materials, and they create these cool squares, and that helps them ship them off in nice kind of little units. And then they're sent to both local and international markets or processors. And the markets are always changing, but as of now, Waste Management is sending most of the recycling locally, so that's really exciting that it's here in the US. I know that's a question many people have. There are active markets for sure for glass, for aluminum, and there are some good markets right now locally for more rigid plastics, the type that are accepted in this new program, which we're about to go over. So it is not the recycling symbol, the chasing arrow, that makes something recyclable. There's many other factors on that determine whether or not something can be recycled. So the first thing are the local conditions. So what's recycled here in Albany is different than what can be recycled even somewhere like in San Francisco, because it's a different hauler. So all these rules we're going to talk about today are for this local or little town here, and it depends on whether Waste Management can sort it, whether they can, it can be paid for it to be taken away. So there's many different local conditions. There's also a lot of different chemical properties. So the number on the recycling, all that means is the polymer or the type of plastic that it is. It doesn't mean whether it's recyclable. The number is just helpful in terms of how they process it. So don't get too stuck in Chemistry 101, but you can go up to Berkeley if you guys need a refresher on what these all mean. So the chemical properties are important in how it can be recycled. So glass and aluminum can be recycled indefinitely, and they don't lose their value. But other items like plastic or paper, when they're recycled, they're actually downcycled. So they get, for example, a water bottle could be recycled into a fleece jacket. And so it's important to think about these. I didn't add the arrow. There's also an opportunity to think about upcycling, where, for example, someone takes a burlap bag and turns it into a designer purse, and they're actually taking something that doesn't have much value and giving it additional value. So that's really exciting when there's creative uses in the community for upcycling. The local markets also determine whether something can be recycled, because ultimately Waste Management has to figure out who's going to purchase these products. And I turned some of the items red in case people didn't know that parentheses means it's a negative value. So in some cases, there's items like number 3 plastics or number 5 plastics that actually you'd have to pay for someone to take away. So the markets can change a lot, and this is something that even in a few months, this might not be accurate. So luckily, it's not any of our jobs to figure that out, and we'll leave it to Lena and Waste Management to figure out what markets do and don't exist. But this is an important thing to think about when we determine whether something can be recycled. All right, so, that looks kind of brown, doesn't it? That's supposed to be gray for the recycling cart color here. But what is accepted here in Albany? So throughout this, I'm going to try and give you some guidelines. I know you guys could come up with 1,000 different items and ask me, is this recyclable? Is it not? So I'm hoping that I can give you some tips and tricks to think about when you're recycling things. Oh yeah, this fits with these different categories. So we'll start with paper. I think this is hopefully one of the easier ones. So cardboard, mail, magazines, any type of paper is accepted. And people always ask, do you have to remove that window on your junk mail? And the answer is no, you don't have to remove it. Even if you've eagerly been taking out that plastic, in the process that they have at Waste Management, they will, in the pulping process, it comes out and floats to the top. So you can use your efforts instead to make sure that what you are putting in the cart is correct. And then the type of cartons that you can recycle are the gable top milk cartons. So that should be the kind without the plastic lid. It has to be all paper. Waste Management has found markets for that type of paper carton, and there's many other types that are not accepted, so it's just those paper gable tops, like the old school milk cartons. If you can save your question, we'll get to it at the end, but just write it down so you remember. And then shiny or coated boxes, that would be cereal boxes, or if you get food from the frozen section, those types of boxes are accepted. And I have a note here about recycling paper. Technically, you're right, paper is compostable if it's plain paper, but it's better to recycle paper because when you start with really high quality paper, office paper, that could be recycled into a medium grade paper like cardboard, and then that could be recycled into paper towels, let's say. So each time you recycle, the fibers get shorter and shorter and shorter. So we want to recycle the paper as much as we can until it gets to the lowest grade products, which is what we would want to put in the compost. So we'll get into the compost in a second, but ideally you put all of the paper in the recycling except for what's on the compost, the organics section in a little bit. All right, so glass and metal, beer bottles, wine bottles, Coke bottles, all of that can go into the recycling as glass, and then also any sort of steel or aluminum cans, that's pretty standard, and then aluminum foil. The most important thing with aluminum foil, if there's food inside or food on it, you want to take off as much food as you can, and then ball it into little balls so that the food is on the inside so that it doesn't get contaminated on all the paper. And ideally, I think it's around the size of baseball or your fist. You want to make a little ball of the aluminum foil versus putting in like little tiny pieces. All right, you guys ready for plastics? All right, so I have a lot of examples because I know many people have a ton of questions about this. So I mentioned this a little bit. We are moving away from the numbers, and we're thinking about plastics differently. And the important reason for that is just it helps people think about, kind of determine what can and can't be recycled. So the items you want to think about are tubs, jugs, bottles, and jars. So that's the container shape of it. So for example, I brought my dishwashing soap container. This is a great plastic bottle. So you want these big shapes that have really thick plastic walls. So this, you guys all know, has a really good thick plastic wall. And any sort of tub, like shampoo containers, yogurt tubs, condiment containers, all of those plastics with thick plastic, you can basically hold it and squeeze it and it doesn't crinkle. That's the type of plastic that we can recycle. So a lot of examples of plastics that we cannot any quick questions? If you have really quick questions about this, we can ask it now, but if not, we'll get to that. Okay, then, yep, thank you. Okay, so what cannot be recycled? This is the plastics that can go in the trash. So I brought a lot of examples. So clamshells, that's what this kind of food container is. These are very thin plastics. You can hear it crinkles, it's very thin. So all of this, it's not recyclable because it's not a good enough quality. So plastic containers like this, or like a berry carton, that's not recyclable. And then other examples of things like these to-go containers, all of this is very thin plastic. Little plastic cup. And you guys can come up after the presentation and check out all my examples. Or if you get like a little to-go sushi container, a little small ranch container, something like that. Those are all the types of plastics that are not recyclable. To show you an example, to go back one slide, to go in the recycling. This is an example of something, this is about the thinnest that the recycling can be of plastic before it's not recycled anymore. So you guys can come check that out. This is like pretty rigid. It holds its shape when I kind of tug it. This is the thinnest of the plastics that you can recycle. Okay, and then plastic film. I had some questions before the presentation about plastic film. So all plastic bags, plastic wraps, sandwich bags, all go into the trash. So that would be like a Ziploc bag, or if you have like wrapping on your toilet paper, that all goes into the trash. And some businesses, they might be trying to trick you because it has that recycling symbol, but it says in tiny letters, store drop-off only. So that's why they're not accepted. So there's a few reasons that they don't accept them here. Number one, this plastic, if it's put in loose, gets caught up in the machinery and it can jam the machinery. And number two, this is a pretty low-grade plastic and hard to find markets for. And we don't want to contaminate other good markets and perhaps have loads with a lot of this plastic in it. So that's why Waste Management and the City of Albany have decided that this should all go into the trash. And then the piece down here about small plastics. So small plastic items like plastic silverware, straws, coffee cup lids, sauce containers, all of those also go in the trash. So in order for something to be recycled, it has to be rigid, bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars, and about bigger than your fist, but like volume-wise bigger than your fist. I know a fork is longer than my fist, but it's not volume-wise bigger than my fist. You guys all probably know there's, I think, a styrene ban here and in many places, but also no styrofoam. And then we'll talk more about compostable plastics in the plastics question. There was a lot of questions about that in the pre-survey. But just to remind you, compostable plastics also go into the trash. You read my mind. It's on the slide. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Good question. So now paper. So I want to do plastics first so we could have those slides right next to each other. So the paper that's not accepted are paper with plastic coatings. That's exactly what this great mind over here was asking about. The ice cream cartons, coffee cups, soda cups, any sort of takeout container, it can't be recycled because it's paper with a plastic lining. So it's that mixed material. And then any other like really thick mixed materials like what's called an aseptic, so that would be your soy milk boxes, your almond milk boxes, soup and juice boxes. All of that is also not accepted in the recycling because it has mixed material. It has plastic, it has paper, and some even have metal in it. So when it has those mixed materials, it can't be sorted out into individual types of materials to be recycled. Can you write your question down and we'll get to them in the Q&A. So hopefully that helps clarify some of the reasons about why these items go into the trash. And if you have any questions, there's tons of experts here that we'll get to in the Q&A about your questions. So someone asked also about recycling. Number one is the recycling needs to be clean and dry. So what I do to know if it's recyclable, if it's clean enough, tip it upside down. If nothing is coming out of it, that's fine. If there's a ton of liquid, you have half a smoothie, ideally drink your smoothie first and then put it in the recycling. You do not need to rinse the items. They will be rinsed during the recycling process. But if you have a lot of food that's thick, like let's say some mayonnaise went bad, you can scrape out the mayonnaise with a spatula and then into the compost and then recycle the clean jar. And just so you know, I think the presentation will be provided afterwards, so you guys can look at this in more detail as well then. Yeah, so peanut butter jars need to be, just like mayonnaise jars, it needs to be emptied. Let's say it went bad, scrape out the second half of it. But if you ate all of it, it's fine with a tiny little residue, that's fine. So because when you hold a peanut butter jar upside down, no peanut butter is coming out. And one of the easiest ways that you can make sure that your recycling is actually recycled is to skip the bag. We do not want your recycling in a plastic bag because then it goes to that conveyor belt, it goes down the line, and it can't be sorted by the people. They don't have time. Those lines are moving so fast. They don't have time to rip your bag and sort it. So it's really important to skip the bag. If you want to use a liner, you can dump it upside down like in that bottom photo, empty it out, and then throw away the liner. In my recycling at home, we don't use a liner, and we just dump it in and then continue to use that container throughout the week. Let's make sure I got all my, okay, perfect. Okay, so here's my top 10 or top 6 recycling message take home. So if you forgot everything I just said or weren't taking notes, here's what you really want to remember. Your trash is not sorted. It's going to the landfill, but your recycling is sorted. So it's important to make sure putting the right items into your recycling cart so it can be sorted and be recycled. The recycling processes are super complicated and ever-changing. So here in Albany, most control we have is that we can recycle right. But it's, we're not in charge of the domestic or the international recycling partners. So things could change in the future. Things have changed now than in the past, and that's why we're here. So hopefully this is helpful for now, but there could be an update in a few years, depends on what happens. But we're trying our best to make sure that everyone here knows what to do. The plastics, only rigid plastic tubs, jugs, bottles, and jars. So that bullet hopefully can help you determine when you're looking at an item if it can be recycled or not. And then small plastic film, plastic containers, all that small flimsy plastic is not recyclable. As I just mentioned, do not bag your recycling. It's okay in a paper bag. Just to be safe, if I do use a paper bag, I just dump it out and then recycle the paper bag, just in case. So that's what I would do if you are using a paper bag for recycling. And ultimately, you can limit your waste by purchasing items that do have recyclable plastic. So maybe instead of toilet papers in this kind of container, maybe you could get ones in paper that you could recycle. What if that paper bag is soiled? Well, ideally, it shouldn't be soiled because your recycling should be clean. So if your paper bag is getting really soiled, that might be a hint that you should either get out the food a little bit better with a spatula, or if you must, you could also rinse it if there's something that just won't come out with a spatula. But if it's soiled, you could put it in the compost. All right, so if you have any questions, write them down in your comment card. We'll get to them during the Q&A. All right, composting 101. I'm guessing there's a few less questions, but we'll definitely talk about compostable plastics. So I like to think composting is a really great opportunity because food and yard waste, it decomposes into methane gas in the landfill. And depending on which scientist you ask, methane gas is 20 to 80 times more powerful than CO2. So methane has a huge impact on greenhouse gases, and that's why there's a lot of state legislature right now to reduce methane gas related to food waste in the landfill. So composting and making sure you're composting all your food scraps is a really big way that you can individually have a very strong positive impact on the environment. Not only does it reduce methane gas, but compost also can return valuable nutrients to the soil, and it helps farmers use less pesticides, use less water, and have better crop yields. There's many great options for why we should compost. So the compost is not some sort of backyard willy-nilly thing. This is a state-of-the-art facility. There's a lot of scientific measurements that go on to make sure that it is safe to use afterwards. So they start by grinding up all of those branches that you might put in there from yard work or any bigger pieces of wood that go in, and that's mixed with food waste. And then it's placed in what's called a covered aerated static pile, and that's just the type of composting that the waste management facility does. And they have to make sure it gets to 131 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the good kind of safe temperature for at least 3 consecutive days. And then it remains in the pile for 120 days, and then it's cured for another 6 months. So it's quite a long process, but it's really exciting because it's something that's happening very, very close to home. So it's something that, your compost isn't being shipped maybe far away like your recycling might be somewhere else in the US, but composting is happening right here. And then it's tested to make sure it fits with the compliance. And then Waste Management also wants to certify it to make sure that it can be certified organic compost. And then they sell it to local people here in California, like farmers, vineyards. And I think there's a few days throughout the year that residents can also go and purchase the compost as well, which is pretty exciting. So composting, the first thing to think about is any sort of food that you would eat. So that's chicken bones or raw chicken, vegetables, eggshells, anything that is edible or comes from something related to food can go into the compost. And then also coffee grounds and paper coffee filters can go into the compost as well. And then tea bags. Many people always ask, what about that little metal staple? You do not have to remove that tiny metal staple, but it is important to think about whether the tea bag is made of a natural fiber or a plastic fiber. So you just have to look. The natural ones tear pretty easily, especially when they're wet. When plastic bags are wet, they do not tear. So and they're more shiny. So I'm not sure if you have questions on that. Maybe you could text Lizzie a photo or something like that, but you could maybe email me as well if you needed some clarification on whether your tea bag is plastic or not. But ideally, you'd want to maybe look for an opportunity to purchase products where the tea bag is compostable. All right, someone had a question earlier before the presentation about food soiled paper, so you can tell your coworkers that all paper towels should go into the organics. So that would be pizza boxes, napkins and paper towels, egg cartons, and then unlined plastic takeout containers all go into the organics. And that's because these items have food on them, and once paper gets contaminated with food, it needs to go into compost and it can no longer be recycled. So that is why napkins go into the compost. Not only are they food, but they're also the shortest fibers possible, so they can no longer be recycled anyways. So even a clean paper towel would go, or clean napkin would still go into the compost because it's at the end of its life cycle or life as a piece of paper. And then also if there's bamboo or wood plates or utensils, which has become a little bit more popular recently with the lack of acceptance of compostable plastics, those could also go into the organics. And then shredded paper. Waste management does not want your shredded paper in the recycling because it becomes a confetti party. No one wants that shredding blowing throughout the recycling. So if you put it in the organics, then the paper can help also soak up the liquids. That's where you should put the shredded paper. Yeah, so even egg cartons are just like paper towels. That's at the lowest grade paper. So you want to put the eggshell cartons in the compost too because they can't be recycled any further. So those two items, like paper egg cartons and napkins and paper towels all go into the compost, whether they have food on them or not. What about parchment paper? Parchment paper can if it has a wax base, but some are petroleum based, and I've tried to figure out which ones are which. So, I'm talking about wax paper. I think parchment paper, normally it's all fine. Wax paper, a lot of times the wax is now actually petroleum based instead of a natural wax. So something like wax paper, to be safe, I would put it into the trash. And then when you guys are doing yard work at your houses, you also want to make sure you're composting all of your leaves, yard, plant debris. If you have, let's say, cut flowers, once they die, you can put that into the compost as well. And only clean and untreated wood can go in there. So most furniture has a lacquer or a plastic on it, and that is not something we want in our soil. So it needs to be untreated wood. I think not that many options of wood at Home Depot or any lumber store are untreated, but when you're purchasing it, you could ask the person at Home Depot if it's treated or not to help you know if it's accepted in the compost. All right. So no human waste, no pet waste. So if you're using, let's say, paper towels in the restroom stalls, none of that, or toilet tissues, none of that toilet paper goes into compost. If, let's say, you have a bloody nose, don't put that in the compost. We don't want any sort of pathogens in the compost. And then also any carnivorous animals, dogs, cats, and probably any animal waste, just to make sure that no bacteria or viruses get into our compost via animal droppings. So all of that would go into the trash. Or if, let's say, an animal passes away, also you cannot go into the trash. All right, compost. Do you have a question about animal? Yes.
What about tissue from blowing your nose?
Okay, good question. Yeah, tissue from blowing your nose, that's fine. That can go into the compost, just not with a bloody nose. Yeah. And then, all right, compostable plastic, also hot button topic. All of that goes into the trash. It is not accepted. And there's a few reasons why. The main reason is that in order to compost this type of plastic, it needs to have a much wetter and much hotter composting process than what waste management is doing now. So that's the first reason that we can't actually process it in the style of composting that we're doing. The second reason is that the compostable plastic does have some non-organic chemicals in it, and Waste Management wants to certify their compost as organic because it has a higher price point and they can sell it, have more people who want to purchase it. And then, so basically our stance on compostable plastics is we discourage people from purchasing it. It's more expensive, it goes into the trash, and it can cause a lot of contamination in the organics and recycling. So we'll talk more during some of the ideas of how you guys can have an impact on this, but I think a great way to think about compostable plastics is all these local businesses in Albany, they might not know that compostable plastics are not accepted anymore. This is one of the major changes from the program. So if all of us are mentioning that to local businesses, there's going to be a huge hearing from the community. Oh yeah, we actually cannot accept these products anymore. So that's one thing that we can hopefully talk about at the end of the presentation on how we can all have a difference. And this is what contamination in the compost looks like. I see you. Write down your question. We'll get to you during the Q&A. Thank you. So glass is a really, really bad contaminant, especially if you think about the soil is going onto farms and perhaps there's people walking on the glass or on the soil. We want to make sure there's no glass, no metal, even compostable bags, like bag liners. Those are a contaminant, which I'll give you some opportunities for other options in a second. Definitely we don't want plastic. And then plant containers, people often put their plant, when it dies, with that plastic container straight into the compost. You got to take that out and put that plant container into the trash. All right, so here are some tips. Instead of doing, so the first tip is to make your compost convenient. I like to keep mine on the counter or under my kitchen sink so that it's where we are creating the waste. And then I also like to collect it in a very convenient way. So here are some options in these photos. You can do a standard container like that. If you want, you can purchase one from Target or any sort of store like that. You can buy a compostable container. You could also just put it into a bowl you have at your house, and then once you finish prepping for a meal and finish eating, you could just bring that bowl out into the compost and then wash your bowl. I also tested this as a little scientific research study for you guys. You can collect your compost in a bag and keep it in the freezer, and it will store in the freezer for an entire week. So you could put all of your compost into a brown paper bag, put it in the freezer. It doesn't smell. The liquids don't cause a problem because they all freeze. And then you just bring that bag and you put that whole bag into the compost at the end of the week before collection. And you could also use newspaper and collect it that way as well. So it's important to either use one of these methods, or if you are using a plastic bag to collect your compost, you need to put the compost into your cart outside loose with no plastic bag or no compostable bags. Compostable bags are also contaminant in the compost. And the third tip here is, like I said before, putting in shredded paper or pizza boxes can help reduce the amount of liquid that gets into your compost cart and can cause issues with bugs or other kind of animals or things in your cart that you might not want there. So that's another tip if you're having issues with that, is you can try to put in more, make sure you're putting in your paper towels or pizza boxes and shredded paper to help. All right, I know there's a lot of questions. Write them down in your comment card and we'll get to them during the Q&A. Lizzie, would you like to come? Besides all this, there's a lot, besides this presentation, there's so much more that the City of Albany is doing for reducing waste and other citywide programs. We wanted to make sure that everyone knew about that.
All right, hello again. Again, thank you all for coming. It's really exciting to see so many people in the audience, and I'm hearing a lot of ums and ahs back there, and that's really great as someone who's kind of a geek about this kind of stuff. So some of the programs we have to help make sure that you're recycling and composting and putting things in your trash properly, I'll go over now. The first is we have curbside trash, recycling, and organics service. If you need to readjust your service, you can do so by calling Waste Management. You can also get in touch with me and I can help facilitate that. We have an annual compost giveaway every May. This year it's on May 16th, 2020 from 9 to 12, not 8:30 for some of you who were there very early last year. It starts at 9 a.m. and we'll be giving away 40 cubic yards of compost. And this is the compost that's created using your food scraps. So when you compost properly and you do the right thing and send your food scraps to waste management with your green bin, we're turning that into real organic compost, and then you can pick up 2 free bags of compost in May. More details on that to come. We also have some special handling. We have bulky pickups for single families 2 times annually. So you get a free first bulky pickup, and then you can also get a second free bulky pickup. The second one is first come, first serve, up to 300, but you should be able to get one unless a ton of people are doing bulkies that year. And then we also have household hazardous waste drop-off events 2 times a year. We're not going to really dive into household hazardous waste today, but mainly think about pesticide, fertilizer, paint, a lot of household cleaners. If you have those stockpiled in your garage, you can bring them to our household hazardous waste drop-off events. Just bring your Albany ID, and then they'll be taken to a facility where they will be taken care of properly, because they do not belong in the trash. They can leach into the groundwater. The next one is in July, right? The next household hazardous waste? Or June.
Since that's a long ways away, you can also drop it off at the Davis Street Transfer Station it's in Oakland, I think on 7th Avenue. You can look up the directions there, and I think it's free for residents. Businesses, there's a small fee.
I'll also mention that most of this information is on our city website. If you go to our Albany website and then go to our waste and recycling pages, almost all of this information is on there. We also have some special events that can help with reduce, reuse, recycle. There's a citywide garage sale on May 9th. Last year we had over 60 homes register for a garage sale, and they all occur on the same day at the same time, so you can kind of make an afternoon of going around and shopping for lightly used items or getting rid of your lightly used items. There are also some crop swaps and clothing swaps hosted by our recreation department. There's a toy swap around December, and then again, the compost giveaway on May 16th. I mentioned this one twice because so many people love this event. Some of the policies we have in Albany to help encourage reducing our waste as a city are the polystyrene foam ban, which bans polystyrene takeout containers and those cups. So if you see those somewhere out in Albany, you can call us and we'll make sure that nobody's using them anymore, but I haven't heard a complaint in a very long time. I've never heard a complaint, and I know Claire hasn't heard a complaint in a very long time. We also have a reusable bag ordinance, which bans single-use plastic bags and requires a charge for paper or reusable thick plastic bags. There's also a mandatory recycling and organics ordinance with sorting requirements for businesses and multifamily buildings. We're working on an update to our construction and demolition ordinance. So when someone does a remodel or a retrofit or builds a new home, there are certain thresholds they have to meet to make sure that the materials from that project are being recycled and not just being sent to the landfill in bulk. We're hoping to have an update to that this year, so stay tuned for that if you're interested. We're also working on an update to our environmentally preferable purchasing policy, spearheaded by Bianca, who is our Civic Spark Fellow. You'll be hearing from her soon. It's now going to have a new catchy name of Sustainable Procurement Policy, and we're hoping to make sure that city purchases are low carbon, low environmental impact. Everything from our fleet to our office supplies to equipment we use for events. And then the county is also doing some work to develop a reusable foodware ordinance. Right now there are some pilot projects going on, and we're hoping that one day soon we can look into doing a reusable foodware policy here. I'll also mention that in December of 2019, our city council unanimously adopted a new climate action and adaptation plan with some very big goals in it for reaching carbon neutrality by 2045 with an interim carbon reduction target of 70% by 2035. we're hoping to really try to decarbonize all sectors, generate clean, renewable energy, and also pull carbon from the atmosphere. And we thought we'd bring this up today because a huge part of that is thinking about materials we're using, activities we're doing, and also what how we're disposing of our items. So as I mentioned, those are our climate action goals. It's also as an adaptation plan, we hope to adapt to the effects of climate change. One of the strategies within the plan is to facilitate a carbon-free economy. So as I mentioned, as a city, we want to make sure we're choosing low or no carbon options. And we also want to incentivize individuals to make smart choices when it comes to doing what's right for lowering your carbon footprint and making sure you produce less waste so that we're sending less to the landfill and making sure that we're reducing our carbon footprint as a city as a whole. So this graphic on the screen here, we did a community inventory which identifies emissions coming from our transportation, our building sector, but then we also looked at a consumption-based inventory, and these are all the emissions tied to travel, purchasing, waste disposal, food habits, all those everyday little things that you don't really think about having a huge impact to the environment, but actually really add up. So our consumption-based inventory as a whole is about 300,000 megatons of carbon dioxide equivalent. I think I got that number right. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Bianca to talk about carbon-free Albany.
Cool, so I'm just gonna talk for 1 second about Carbon-Free Albany, which is an online platform that the city hosts, which offers resources on waste and energy reduction efforts. And so you can learn a lot about different actions you can take to reduce your carbon impact, to reduce your waste. And it's also a community-wide platform, so you can form teams with friends and neighbors and then take action together to reduce your carbon footprint. And we're actually currently running a challenge, a citywide challenge, from now until June, the 2020 Carbon-Free Albany Challenge, where the household or the team who's reduced their carbon dioxide emissions the most within that time period will be celebrated. We'll have a prize for them at a community event celebration in June. So you can learn more about the site at carbonfreealbany.org. I'll also be sitting at a table in the back over there answering any questions people might have. You can sign up if you're interested and ask me whatever you want. But yeah, it's just a really great platform for folks in the community to learn more about the actions they can take and help reduce both the community-wide side of emissions as well as the consumption-based emissions. And I'll turn it back over to Jess.
It's exciting to see that there's so much community-wide efforts. It's not just us individuals, but there's so much that Claire, Lizzie, Bianca are doing to make sure that we're doing a lot of really great sustainable things here in Albany. So we're doing a quick 5-minute stretch break, and there's a pop quiz. So I hope you were not studying, and now we have an open book so you can use your sheets that you need for the quiz, and an open neighbor quiz so you can ask your people sitting next to you as well. So here are the 10 items, and I want you to write down on your piece of paper where these 10 items go. So we have a paper coffee cup. If you guys want to see the items, they're up here. We have paper coffee cup. Where does the berry container go? Everyone's favorite, an Amazon pouch. Toilet paper roll. Compostable plastic silverware. What stream does that go in? Egg carton. Paper towel. Compostable plastic cup. A cardboard box. And some junk mail I got from my dentist. So everyone, take a few-minute break, and you can figure out where these items go. Ask your neighbors if you need. Everyone ready for the answers? All right. So you guys excited to see if you learned anything from me? Yeah. That's right. So I picked these items. I picked on purpose because these are some of the top items that I see incorrectly when I'm doing bin audits as another part of my job besides doing resident outreach. So I picked all of these because they're commonly in the wrong spot. I don't know why people don't know that toilet paper rolls, I'll tell you the answer is recyclable. I don't know what gets people to put that in the trash, but I see the toilet paper rolls in the trash so often that I had to put it in this quiz. So here are the answers. So paper coffee cups go into the trash, and someone asked during the stretch break, I have this example here of a compostable, says certified compostable like soup bowl. This is just like the coffee cup. It goes into the trash. It has a plastic lining, and even though it is made out of a product that could be compostable, because Waste Management is certifying their compost as organic, that thin plastic lining that's made out of compostable plastic still is not accepted by Waste Management. So even if it has this nice green stripe, and same with the coffee cup I got from Hal's that has a nice green compostable cup, that is not recyclable or compostable. Berry containers, we talked about, that goes in the trash. Amazon pouches, you can't see it in that photo very well, but this has a huge recycling symbol on it. They are trying to trick you, and that's why we're moving away from thinking about the symbol as the symbol for recyclables, and we're thinking about it's very flimsy plastic and it goes in the trash. Okay, toilet paper roll, you talked about compostable plastic silverware, it goes in the trash. Egg cartons, we talked about, these go in the organics. It's the flimsiest of paper and it can't be recycled anymore. Paper towels, same thing, whether it's clean or not there. Compostable plastic, when it has that stripe, goes into the trash. Hopefully everyone saw the cardboard box goes into the recycling, but if not, you can learn that now. And then junk mail, even with the plastic window, can go into the recycling. Oh, good question. So you do not need to take the tape off. Just like the plastic window, in the way that it's recycled, that plastic tape will kind of float to the top and they'll take it off. So use your efforts instead to study some of the materials that I did here. If you can save your Q&A for the end, we'll get to it. All right. Hopefully you feel empowered. Maybe some of these items before you got here, you thought they went into the recycling or compost, but realized they go in the trash now. So I picked these on purpose. Items that I have a lot in my household, and you guys probably do as well. So I'm really excited because when we started to develop this presentation, Claire, Lizzie, and Lena and I all wanted to go beyond just what goes where, but talk about upstream ways to reduce our waste. As an Albany resident, I was feeling very sad when I started to follow these new rules, and my trash was more voluminous than it previously was, so you may as well feel that sadness that a lot more items are going into the trash than you realized. So we want to talk about other upstream prevention ways to reduce waste, and then there's a lot of tables here that from local community opportunities for you to reduce your waste as well. Oh, yes. This part down here, we're going to take some notes on some of these ideas. I'm going to go through about 10 different ideas for you, and then we'll have a few minutes where people can reflect and come up with some ideas of things that you might want to change in your day-to-day habits, and we'll set some intentions around that to further your waste reduction and hopefully change some behaviors out of this presentation. Number one, I would guess not many people here are not composting already because you guys all seem very eager and are excited to be here learning. But if you aren't composting already, I think it is a really important way to reduce the environmental impact that you have in your household. I took all of these photos myself, so I brought some examples up to this table, and I'll be answering some questions about reusable ideas. So this is my personal zero waste kit that I carry with me. So I put my camping fork or spork and knife inside of a bandana so that I have a napkin and then silverware in my purse. It's very light, and just have it in my purse all the time. And then if I'm gonna get coffee, I'll use a small cup, coffee cup, and then I also have my 1 liter Nalgene that can hold really great, it's a different brand. What brand is that one? I think it's Hydro Flask. That's it, Hydro Flask, but there's many other brands out there. So carrying some durables with you in your purse or in your bag is a really great way to have those when you encounter a business that is serving you on single-use disposable items. When you look at the lunches that you're eating, if you're eating out at work or with family or on a picnic, thinking about ways to reduce the packaging lunches. So some options are to make your own salad dressing and carry it in a small mason jar instead of those little packages. To avoid individually packaged snacks. And for example, you could put your food into one of these silicone Ziploc bags that's dishwasher safe, and you can reuse it all the time. So you could put your apple in there, you could put nuts in there, goldfish, whatever you eat in snacks, and instead buy in bulk because it has lower packaging. And then you can also switch to Tupperwares, glass, plastic, or metal containers and carry your food that way instead of Ziploc bags. So we're just talking about ways, so the Tupperware, it would go in the, well, it's probably rich enough to be recycled, but the idea is you would use your Tupperware multiple times so that you can use it, for years versus using containers. And silicone, that hopefully you're using that, many, many times. At the end of its life, it would go into the trash. So another idea is zero waste lunches or zero waste at restaurants. And this photo is our office manager. I don't know if he came. He's also an Albany resident, and he took all of our containers and put our orders on the lids with tape, and then he brought it to a local restaurant near our offices in Oakland, and they filled up all of our different orders in the reusable containers. So it was very exciting to see. Hold your question till the end, and we'll get to it. Oh, so they just passed a law in California that protects, kind of like a Good Samaritan law. It protects the restaurants. So as long as you bring in a clean container, they have to fill it because it protects them from the, like if, let's say there's some germs in your container, that's then your fault instead of the restaurant's fault. Statewide. Yeah, so, yep. Yep. Okay.
Just in the past, restaurants would decline to do it because they said, I will be in violation of the health code. So this makes it clear that a restaurant is not in violation of health code for doing it, but the restaurant does not have to do it. Of course, the preferable, what I do, the restaurant says they won't do it. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to take my business elsewhere. So.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I haven't had a restaurant that declines when I explained that they would be covered, they wouldn't be sued. So it's helpful to have that knowledge. So, yeah, I have had to educate people, and that's one of the reasons we included this in the presentation, is that, thank you for bringing up that question, I was going to get to that, that we wanted people to know we're out here being eco warriors, and we're out educating the community on new laws that a restaurant owner might not already know. So you can bring your own food for takeout. It's possible you could call ahead and ask, can I bring your own container, and then they'll fill it for you that way. And then also, I like to have a container if I'm going to a restaurant. I fill it up, my leftovers, if I can't eat those huge portions that they give you, so that I can bring it home in my own container versus a container that we know most of these go into the trash, the takeout containers. And like you were mentioning about supporting local businesses, you can also support local businesses that do not have single-use items for dine-in customers. So if you're sitting down there, hopefully they have reusable silverware and durable plates instead of plastic or paper plates. So we also want to think about how we can reuse items. There's lots of different ways to do that. So you can think about how to purchase used clothing, home and garden supplies. And there's the citywide garage sale as a way for you to share items you already have with your neighbors and for you to also get items like that. I took this photo. The top photo is actually a clothing swap that I attended with a ton of friends. There's about 15 of us, and we swapped clothes, and that shirt is one that I got from a clothing swap for free. So it was exciting to share what I have with other people and switch our outfits around. And then the bottom two shirts I got at a local consignment store. They're really great brands for really cheap price and really high quality stuff. And I also wore an outfit that I got completely at a consignment store here on Solano Avenue. So it's very exciting when you can get some really good steals too. There's also Craigslist free. You can give away things for free. You can also get free chairs, free tables, free couches. Obviously, make sure the couches don't have any sort of like bugs in them. And then I've heard of people with Nextdoor, the Albany, I've heard it's very active, the Albany Nextdoor, so you can post stuff there and get free items there. And there's also a lot of options to rent instead of buy. Like if you're going to a formal place, you could rent your dress, rent your suit, rent your tuxedo, and then you don't have to store that in your closet. When we think about repairing, there's a lot of options as well. I also wore these shoes because I have repaired the soles of them and I repaired the inner lining. So if anyone has any questions about how to repair items, I repair a lot of my items because I'm cheap and I want to spend my money on very exciting experiences versus new items that I could easily sew or mend myself. My trick is to YouTube how to fix something. So just type in if something breaks, like your vacuum cleaner, you can just YouTube whatever's wrong with your vacuum cleaner, and there's so many good tutorials out there that can help you fix items that you need to fix. I know there's a few businesses here that actually specialize in repairing items. There's some local shoe repair places and tailors, so there's also places, if you're intimidated, you can look for a place that helps you with that as well. And I know there's some bike fix-it clinics and other places where you can learn how to fix things yourself. And then this is all very tiny, but this is the very extensive list of what is in the Albany tool pool, which is where you can borrow tools. So I'll read out some. There's axes, there's chalking guns, there's levers, there's saws, there's trowels, there's planes, there's pliers. So if there's a tool you might need once, it's at the community center. You have to email, get on the list, and then they will do it. You can look it up online, unless Claire, I don't know if she knows. Claire, where's the tool pool stored? Is it the senior center? Yeah, which is right down the street from here, on the other side of Solano. So there's basically any tool you need, you could rent it there instead of buying one from Home Depot. As we were talking about before about paper towels and napkins, there's a lot of items like this. They can come from recycled paper instead of from new trees. And so consider purchasing paper towels, toilet paper, etc. that comes from recycled content, and consider 100% recycled printer paper and post-consumer products that are out there as well. And I did not include this, but I actually don't even have paper towels in my house. I have some rags that I use and I wash many times over. So if you want some tips on that, I can show you after the Q&A. I've brought all of my reusable items that I have and zero waste stuff for you guys to check out my local, how I do zero waste. There are so many places where you can refill containers. So I know Feel Good is here, which is a local opportunity back in the back over there. And then I know there's other stores like Berkeley Bowl. You can refill containers. And there's so many different options of how you can do it. So you can just ask a business if you can refill it. I recently got ice cream at Dewey's in my container. So they filled one of my containers. I confirmed it was the pint size so that they knew exactly how much ice cream to fill it up with. But there's so many different ways you can use durable containers instead of getting things that would go in the trash. And there's so many options. I don't want to list everything, but I often do bulk section, and I found it's really great too. I have a mesh bag that's quite light, so rather than carrying my really heavy glass jars to and from the grocery store all the time, I just put the rice in I'll show you if you have questions, but in a very thin mesh bag so that I can put all my durables in that rather than having to weigh and tear the containers. So that leads me into zero waste grocery shopping. I know many of you probably bring your reusable bags. You don't want to pay 10 cents for them, but you could go even further by using reusable produce bags. So you can see here I have two different options that I have, some cotton ones and some plastic ones. There's also, like I mentioned, the options of purchasing in bulk, and this is something that I have never seen another person doing when I shop at a meat container, but I challenge you all to do this, and I'll see you there. You can bring I see some fans over in the back, so I must not shop at the same time as you, but you can bring your glass containers in, or plastic if you want, and the meat area can tear your container, and you can put that there instead of having the packaging around your meat. This is my dinner a few nights ago. This is my leftovers. So it's really important when you think about food waste. Food waste, there's a lot of energy that went into growing your food, a lot of people that picked your food, a lot of manpower to move your food across the country and across the globe. So we don't want all that energy to go to waste once it's in your refrigerator. So it's important to think about how you can reduce your food. Make sure you label your leftovers and you can eat them before they expire. You put it in the freezer to eat them later. And then there's a ton of great resources from Stop Waste. There's this link right here, and they give you a lot of cool opportunities on how to redesign your kitchen, do an inventory of your refrigerator, and some great tips as well. And the final thing, idea that I have is that there's some really cool local community-supported agriculture boxes that are more zero waste. So the one that I have is Full Belly Farms, and there's probably others out there that have less packaging than many CSAs. So it comes in a durable plastic box you don't actually take home, and you put all your produce in your bag yourself. So there's some cool opportunities to not only support local agriculture and local businesses, but also do that in a zero waste way. And I'm happy to talk about this at the end as well. So there's a lot of ideas, but we want it to not just stop in this room. So this is a post of what I wore for Halloween 2 years ago. I dressed up as a recycling bag. And so you can spread the word on Instagram or Facebook, or you can talk to your neighbors, talk to people who live with you, talk to your renters. Spread the word on how to sort properly. That's really important, but also on how people can go beyond that in doing waste reduction. One of the coolest things with the meat container, every time I'm in the grocery store with that, people didn't know that you could fill your glass containers for meat. So by doing some of these ideas and spreading the word, people will see that these are options. And I talked about this a little bit earlier, but there's a lot of us here, and as you were mentioning, we want to advocate for local businesses to switch over to products that are actually ideally durable, or if not, recyclable or compostable. So now that this presentation has happened, I'm hoping to go to my favorite coffee shops and let them know they are using compostable paper cups that go into the trash. And I urge you all, for any of the restaurants you use here in Albany, to let them know as well, hey, this is not an item that can be accepted in the recycling and or compost. The City of Albany has tried. There are some businesses who have been quite resistant. And so that's why there technically aren't laws that say they can't use this. But if there's all of their customers reminding them that these go in the trash, that can be a really effective way to have change coming from the top and the bottom. And this presentation will be online, so you could provide them the link that demonstrates, hey, the City of Albany has this. This is something you should consider. Yeah, I know they're working on that. Thank you. I've seen a lot of buzz around that. And then Claire mentioned there's also the Albany or Alameda County-wide ordinance as well for single-use disposables. There's a lot of options. Can come, advocates like you encouraging City Council to do that as well. So I'm sure you wouldn't mind if people talk to you afterwards about some strategies on how to do that. So great other options on how to encourage family, friends, and City Council to adopt some of these. So before we wrap up and get to your favorite thing you've been waiting for, the Q&A section, if everyone could just take their comment card, maybe think about some of the ideas that I recommended. Maybe you're doing all of them, but maybe you're not. So if you can think about 1, 2, 3, or more ideas of how you could change your daily life. And I want you to think, not just pledge, oh, I'm going to pledge it, but actually think about the who, what, where, when, and why of doing this new thing. So let's say you want to use reusable produce bags. Well, before you can use those, you have to think about when you're going to actually purchase them, and then also think about how you're going to remind yourself to bring them to the grocery store so that you don't forget your reusable produce bags. So I'm going to spend just maybe 2 or 3 minutes just thinking about and writing on your piece of paper some ideas of what you can do. So just as a reminder, some of the options that we went through: encouraging family and friends, local CSAs, reducing your food waste, zero waste grocery shopping, refillable containers, purchasing changes, repair, reuse, zero waste, packing zero waste lunches, and carrying durables with you. Yeah, if you want it. Yep, there's pledges on the back of the cheat sheets. That's where you can write your pledge down and kind of think through how you would actually have to do these new habits.
think that they're maybe the transfer.
All right, everyone, thank you for taking some time to think about your ideas for how you can reduce waste. So, we're going to do Q&A a little bit differently than you might have expected, but it will be good because everyone has different types of questions. So we're going to have different tables where you go to ask your questions. So the recycling, composting, waste management is going to be over here, as well as Lizzie from the City of Albany. She'll be in the back. And if you have any questions about how to properly sort recycling and organic, look at the questions that you wrote down, and they can answer questions about specific types of materials and where they go. I'll be here likely with Claire talking about ways to reduce and reuse. So if you have questions about those pledges or want to check out the items that I brought from my own house, then you can come up to talk with me. And then Bianca will be here to talk about the City of Albany. And then we have many different community groups at the different tables, and they have amazing opportunities, some of which I've never heard of before tonight. So it's been really cool for me to see about their tables as well. So thank you everyone for coming. And come to the table. What's your question? Yeah, we can spend a few minutes doing Q&A. We'll spend 5 minutes on products, specific Q&A about products, but then we will transition to the tables. What's your question? So bio bags are compostable plastic, like I mentioned. Those go into the trash. They are, and you should not use them even to line your plastic pail. Yeah. So I personally use a plastic bag. I try to reduce as much as I can so I don't have to use them, very many of them, because it is good to contain so it doesn't fly everywhere. Yep, so you could reuse a bag that you get from like a large section as well. So we'll take 3 more questions that people want to hear from the whole audience.
Yeah, what about fabric? Is there any place you can recycle fabric?
Yeah, many people asked about fabric during the Q&A. So ideally, if it's gently used products, then you can donate them. If it's no way for someone to use, there's many places that accept them and give you coupons. Someone said a store that I hadn't heard of, but I know H&M, for example, accepts it, or Marine Layer, but you can also, at the end, throw them away in the trash, yeah. The plastic bags, they might actually, City of Albany might be, they're working on that, but some of those are allowed because they're thick enough that they are acceptable as reusable bags. So that's why they can, some stores can offer those bags. Yeah, so you can, if you don't reuse them, they go into the trash. Okay, we're gonna take 3 more questions. Yep. Yeah, so she asked if you couldn't hear about paper and how to tell if it has a plastic lining or not. The best thing that I do is I tear the paper. If it doesn't tear very easily, it probably has a plastic lining. And then also, if you tear it, you can often see the plastic lining kind of breaking. You might need to get it under some bright light and put like a magnifying glass, or if you can't see it very well. But it is possible to kind of see that plastic lining. So that's my trick.
So you talked about using recycled paper products, which is great. Can we feel confident when something is marked as recycled paper? Can we have confidence that that item is actually recycled paper?
From my understanding, they're certifications, so they can't just willy-nilly put those on the labels, and there are people who are making sure that's the case. So we're going to take 1 more question. I know you guys have a lot, but come up during the Q&A. I'm going to answer her because I've answered a few years, but come up and we'll definitely get to you. Yes?
I heard that you can't recycle receipts from stores.
That's a great question. So many receipts do have BPA linings, and those are not recyclable because they have a plastic in them. So only the receipts that are very obviously paper and they don't have that gloss to them can be recycled. That's a really good question. I know everyone has a lot of questions, but come, Waste Management, City of Albany can come, and if you want to head out, thank you very much for coming. It was so great to see such a good turnout.